Hey guys, welcome to our video series of Ask Us Anything. We're answering questions around technology, the Bible, Christianity, sexuality, culture. Pretty much nothing is off limits. So let's go. Hey Andy, so good to have you back again. I've got a great question for you. I'm looking forward to diving in there as we come at this video series of Ask Us Anything again. So I've asked you before, are you ready to go?
I think I'm ready to go. The caffeine is flowing. It may be getting almost 9 o'clock here in the UK, but the few brain cells are left. So
okay, that's
bring
good.
it on, Stu. Bring it on.
Okay, so this is a great question. And so, yeah, let's just dive into this one. Is the devil real or just a made-up character to scare people?
Wow, what an amazing question. You've got some really good ones coming in. So let me start with a very simple answer to the question, then unpack it. I absolutely think the devil is real. And I think that really for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think because the scriptures teach us that, and I trust the scriptures. Secondly, kind of related off to that, of course, Jesus was very serious about the devil and taking him seriously and not messing around, and I take Jesus very, very seriously. And then thirdly, practically, actually, I think if you look through human history, there is something about human nature and something about the evil we look back through history, that it's very hard to explain some of the worst excesses of humankind's inhumanity to fellow human beings just through a case of if we're just nothing more than a very cleverly evolved primate and occasionally we bang others around the head because we want their bananas. I mean, if you look at the industrialized evil that took place under things like the Nazi regime, or that took place under things like Stalin or Pol Pot's Russia, or Pol Pot's Cambodia, and so on and so forth, I think it's not difficult to actually point to examples of in human history where to go, it's very hard without actually saying that evil is a very real thing. And interestingly, in fact, there's a wonderful British writer called Terry Eagleton, who is an atheist. He's a Marxist, as far as he certainly used to be, but certainly an atheist. And he wrote a book a few years ago called On Evil, in which he concludes just this. He concludes you really can't avoid the conclusion that evil is a real force. It basically, once you remove that from your sort of collection of explanations, it's very, very hard as a secular person to really explain some of what we see as we look back through human history. And I think that's interesting. And he's an atheist saying that. So that's the first thing I would say. Second thing I would then add into that is to go, one of my favorite writers is C.S. Lewis, and beloved by probably many people watching, listening to this. And Lewis said something very interesting on one occasion about the devil. He said there are two kind of equal but opposite errors that a person can fall into when it comes to the devil. The one is to not take him seriously. Consider him a figure of fun, just a made-up figure to scare people, or a comedy figure. We imagine a fat little man dressed in red tights holding a trident, and that's not scary. That's just, that's just sort of lunacy, really, and we dismiss him. And so Lewis said that's one mistake we can make. We don't take the devil seriously, and the Bible has lots of warnings about the devil and being careful, not treating him lightly. But the other mistake we can fall into, said Lewis, is that we can take too much of an interest in the devil, and we can see him behind everything, and we can develop a fascination. I mean, sometimes in human history, we've seen people go the whole way into full-blown devil worship, and Satanism is a real thing. Yeah. And Lewis ends up that discussion, I think it's the beginning of the Screwtape Letters, actually, saying, the devil himself loves both those mistakes. He loves an atheist materialist as much as he does a Satanist, because both are devastatingly dangerous. Whereas the Bible steers a middle ground. It says the devil is real. He's not to be messed with. He's a dangerous opponent, but his power is totally broken through what Jesus did at the cross. As Christians, we have the power to resist the devil. We can call upon the name of Christ, and he is not a threat to us. It doesn't mean we treat him lightly, but he's not something to be afraid of. And if we feel ourselves being tempted, we are to be encouraged, as the scripture says, that we, in the case of Jesus, have a high priest who is tempted in every way and was without sin. And we're also told we can resist the devil and he'll flee from us because of what Jesus has done. So yes, he's real, but as Christians, we don't need to be afraid of him. But nor to say do we take lightly the power of evil, because it's done tremendous damage in human history, testified to, of course, Stu, by the fact that evil has done such harm in human history that the only solution that was to what evil has done was for God to come in the person of Jesus in the flesh and go to the cross to deal with it, which tells us how serious evil is, but it also tells me it's been defeated.
Yeah, I love that you just haven't answered that from a standpoint of just going, yes, he is real, but you brought it back to Jesus to go, yeah, Satan, the devil, he is real, but he is subordinate to Jesus. Like Jesus has conquered, what do we say, sin and death and hell, and you add Satan into that, is that sure, Satan is powerful, but he is lower than Jesus. Jesus is above all things. Colossians tells us that he's preeminent.
That's right.
And so we don't have to fear him. We need to take seriously, like what you said, but we don't have to fear him whatsoever. But in this day and age, I think, quoting from a movie, and I mentioned it in one of the other questions that we did with Andy Stieger, is that the greatest achievements that the devil's done in the past, and maybe still's doing it today, is to convince people that he doesn't exist. And so I think this question comes from that idea. It comes from the father of lies, one of the names that he's given in the Bible, that he's lying to people, that he doesn't exist, as a way of resisting God, and a way of pushing back and go, well, then therefore God, fill in the blank in that kind of way. And so we need to be aware of the different names that is given to him for the way that he manifests himself, as the adversary, as the father of lies, as darkness and evil, in that way, because we do need to be aware of the schemes and the work that he does, because he is real. And if we aren't aware of those things and we just, put it out there or dismiss it, we're not going to be aware of the activity that he's doing. And I think that's a scary place for us to be in, not just a Christian, but for anyone, but particularly for Christians. If we just dismiss the devil's not being real, we're just going to, I think, fall entrapped into the schemes that he is trying to entice us into, or just even the activity that he has around us.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think just two sort of other thoughts on this that occur. You mentioned, sort of the world of kind of sort of movies and so on and so forth, and culture, which has tried to sort of paint the devil out. On the one hand, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because I say Hollywood has actually done two things. On the one hand, you have a very secular kind of sort of world of culture, which tries to sort of say there is no God, there is no devil, don't worry about these things. On the other hand, the fascination with satanic and demonic in a lot of movies I find fascinating. And I think that's C.S. Lewis's two options played out right there in popular culture. But in terms of popular culture, I think, to me, one of the sorts of pieces of literature, both the book and the movie series, that I think actually has some of the most helpful insights into the way that the devil and the evil one, the evil one operates, would be Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I'm a massive Tolkien kind of fan. And what's interesting is largely, not largely, but one of the big themes in Lord of the Rings, both in the books and the movies, is the power of evil. Because it's not a kind of, again, figure in red tights, dancing around kind of thing. Yes, you've got Sauron portrayed as the flaming eye, but you've also got the idea that evil is insidious. Evil can work its way and wheedle its way in and turn, even the most powerful person, Gandalf, one of the most powerful figures in Lord of the Rings, says to Frodo, I can't take the ring, because if I took the ring, I would be tempted to use it for good. Right. And in being tempted to use it for good, evil would subvert me and work even through me. And that recognition that Tolkien had, that it's part of the power of the devil and evil, that it can trick us into going, what you're doing here is for good. What you're doing here is okay. It's okay to do the things that you did. Most people who did great evil in history didn't set out to do great evil. Stalin, who was responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people, didn't sit there and go, I'm going to be totally evil this morning. That's what I'm going to be. Right. No, he had got it into his twisted little head that the way to the greatness of the Soviet people was to put them through this great purge. In the famous saying, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. And to go, evil just got in there and subverted and twisted. And it's the same with you and I. And it's interesting. One of my friends who has the most unusual testimony. I have a friend of mine who now lives in Switzerland, who was quite a hardcore atheist in his youth, wanted nothing to do with Christianity, nothing to do with God. And what finally turned him, and now he's a committed follower of Jesus, was realizing that he was in the grip of evil. He said he slowly began to realize that all the things he was doing, all the various sort of things pursuits he was involved in, that he thought he was in control of, suddenly he began to realize that they were controlling him. And actually he couldn't stop. As he described it, something had got its claws into him, and he was no longer in charge of the stuff that he was doing, and he couldn't stop. And in desperation to try and break free of some of the behaviors that he was involved in, finally that found him moving into the orbit of some Christians who were able to give him all kinds of advice and help and support and encouragement and prayer, and finally committed his life to Christ. And then over a process of a few years, broke free of some of this stuff. But for Theo, it was realizing that actually evil was real because it had got him. And it was very unusual. The only former atheist friend I have who came to faith in God by first realizing there was a devil. And it was when he realized that evil was real that he realized, well, if evil is real, God must be real, and he must be the only one who can help me in the situation that I'm in.
Yeah, wow, that's powerful, and I appreciate you sharing that story. And in some ways, like the problem of evil has to be backed up for the fact that there is an adversary character that is driving a lot of that evil, and being able to come to God through the idea that, man, evil does exist, and that's therefore then we need a savior to be rescued from that, and that evil isn't necessarily out there, but it can twist us and hurt us too. And so I appreciate how you've handled this question, a big question, a tough question that way, and just so grateful that we're on this conversation again to be able to answer these questions that people are asking us. And so we look forward to the next one.
Great stuff. Thanks, Stu.
Thank you for watching this conversation where we answered questions in our Ask Anything series. Make sure that you're following us on social media, and if you got a question, you can head on over to the link in our profile and be able to submit your question, and you never know, maybe we'll be answering yours next. See you next time.